But if you've got your Bibles, I want you to turn tonight to Psalms 61. Psalm 61. And for most of tonight, well, probably majority of the time tonight, we're going to be in verse 4. So Psalm 61, verse 4. Let me dwell in your tent forever. Let me take refuge under the shelter of your wings. Jesus, right now, I pray that you would help me. I pray that right now that you would just give me clarity, conciseness. I pray the words that would come out will be the words that are directed by the Holy Spirit. I pray tonight that you would help us as we look at this psalm, that we would learn something, we would grow into, that we would lean harder into, that we would walk away changed by you. Help us tonight as we leave to make a declaration like David did. We thank you for this time. I thank you for my friends. I pray that you'd bless every single one of them. In your name, amen. So tents. Let's just talk about tents for just a second. I don't know that I'm an expert on tents, but I understand now that I've been in Florida for just a little bit, I understand things that maybe that I'm used to in the north, things are not the same in the south, okay? So that's probably a fair statement. There's a lot of things that I'm experiencing that I'm like, you know what? We experience this in the north. We think this is pretty common, but in the South, it may not be as common, right, as I think. So tents. Like if I said to you, like, hey, who's been tent camping? Like if I was up north, people would be like, oh, absolutely. Like we go up north and tent camp all the time. Like in Florida, I'm not sure. I mean, is tent camping really the thing you want to do? Tent camping in Florida seems like a greenhouse, right? Like you're going to literally sign up to stay in a greenhouse and just like literally sweat it out. I mean, in a tent. About a year ago, so just so you know, some connections. So here in Lakeland, we do have a little family. A little family. That sounds like they're not normal size, but we have some family that's here in Lakeland. My wife's uncle is Mike Cooper. He is the director of the Dream Center there in Lakeland. And so probably a few months or so ago, and let me just say this, and this is probably on record, but if you know Mike, I apologize because Mike is a character. And so if you've ever spent time with him, chances are he said something that, never mind. Mike's a great guy. So Mike was with my girls, and he had this great idea. And he said, I think you guys should go over to Disney, to the campground, and set up a tent and stay there. And I'm like, what? He was like, he was all in. I think he may have even tried to do it. But he was like, he gave this idea to the girls. And I don't know why. I don't know what sparked it. Maybe they wanted to stay at a resort or whatever. He was like, hey, you can just take your own resort. You know, like you got your tent. Take your tent, go over to the campground, and pop it up, you know, and stay there in the campground. It's going to be the best thing ever. Can you imagine as a parent being in a park all day long with kids and then saying to the kids, okay, kids, let's go back to the tent to go to sleep tonight? I mean, it would be disastrous. I mean, that's something they should definitely film. When you think of tents, what comes to your mind? A circus tent? A dome tent? A one-man tent? Like we have, not because we're in Florida now, but we had it long before we came here. We have a beach tent that we can literally go set up on the beach. We can zip it up. We could spend the night in it. It's not that large. As a Royal Ranger, because I did grow up in an Assembly of God church, and I was a Royal Ranger. And as I got a little older, anybody know about Royal Rangers here? So we got a few, okay. As I got a little older, I got in this thing called FCF. Anybody heard of FCF? We got one. So FCS was like Frontiersman Camping Fellowship or Fraternity. It was one or the other. They changed it, I think, at one point. So I was in FCF, and at one point when I was a teenager, I convinced my dad. I don't know why he even said yes, but I convinced him I need to buy a teepee. I had saved up some money, and I knew that this was the best idea that I've ever had. And so I said, hey, I've got the money. Can we buy a teepee? You're laughing, but this is true. My dad's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, so when we go to like an FCF camp, we can take this teepee. It's going to be the best thing ever. And my dad said, okay. And so we went to the place. We bought this teepee. I remember he had a conversion van, and he was like, these poles are like 24 feet long. What are we going to do? And so he had to buy a rack for like a ladder rack for a conversion van. It was a mess, but he said yes. And I remember as a kid, I guess I'd say preteen, growing up, going camping in my teepee. I mean, we were in Ohio at the time, and I mean, it'd be 20 degrees outside. We'd be inside that teepee. We'd get that fire going. It was so hot in there. I mean, you'd start taking clothes off because it's like burning hot. You know, it was the best thing. You would literally go outside and it was cold, and then you would come in and you'd never want to leave. And you'd adjust the flat. No, you don't care. Here's the thing. Tents. Have you ever been collapsed on? Like you've been in a tent and it collapsed on you because you set it up wrong? Have you ever tried to set up a tent and you got really, really frustrated and you're like, this thing does not work. These instructions are not right. These poles are supposed to. Only me. The worst is when you're going camping and you arrive late and it's dark and you have to set a tent up in the dark. I mean, it's like you turn your car headlights on like high beams trying to see how to put this tent up, right? Or have you ever tried to set a tent up in the rain? Now that's bad. Or touched the tent after it rained, and then it just like water floods in, and you're like, how is this possible? Like it was waterproof, then I touched it, and now the water comes in, right? You may say, Brandon, what are you even talking about? I'm talking about tents, yes. And in Psalms 61, you saw right there was tents, and it just sparked all this, but I'm not done yet. Stay with me. When we were in Michigan, we had a end of the year school tradition at our house, okay? Another Michigan thing that some of you may or may not be aware of, but we had a thing called a basement in Michigan. Everybody knows what a basement is? It's your house that's underground, right? So we had a basement. And so our basement was actually finished, and our basement is what they called a walkout basement. So our basement on the one side, there was a sliding door or door wall, and you would walk out. And so at the end of the school year, I would set up one of our tents. Now we have a tent that all five of us, our whole family can fit in this tent. It's massive. And so I would set this tent up for the girls. And let me tell you something. Our youngest, they were all really into it. I mean, they loved when school ended and the tent would go up and the youngest would like literally start moving in. And she would move like most of her possessions from the second floor of our house down all the way to the basement. Like Charity was so annoyed at times. She's like, Elsa, what are you doing? I've got to get my stuffed animals. What are you doing? I've got to take all my blankets. I got to take my pillows. I got to take everything and put in the tent. Why? Because she was moving in. The challenge is I'd set the tent up for them in the basement, and they wouldn't want to take it down. You know why? It's because they moved in. They moved in. They got settled in the tent. They set up their rooms. This tent that we have that's big enough for our family, it's actually got 3 different rooms inside of it. So each of them would have kind of like their own little room, right? And so they would be able to zip up, and they would sleep in it every single night. And the challenge is that we needed our basement because we had a life group, and people would come over to our house, and they'd be like, open up, and they're like, oh, how do I get over to the bathroom, right? Because there was this tent that would take up most of the basement. Like we also had a swimming pool, and people would come over to swim, and they're like, oh, how do I get to the bathroom to change into my swimsuit? Because there was a tent. And the girls didn't want me to take it down. Why? Because they wanted to stay in it. I mean, they had moved into it. Their life was now in the tent, right? And every school year, at the end of the school year, when this time would come, and the girls would remember it, and they'd say, "Are you going to set the tent up?" Like, and Charity would be like, "Really?" I'd be like, "It's a family tradition, Charity. We've got to do it." She would be so annoyed. And she wished that it was a tradition that we didn't have, right? Why? It's because they wanted to be in the tent. Think about this verse again. Psalm 61:4. Let me dwell in your tent forever. Let me take refuge under the shelter of your wings. We should want to be in the tent too. I mean, we should want to move into the tent as well. We should want to take our stuff, the things that are important, and move them into the tent. Because that's what the girls did, right? I mean, that's really what they did. They took things that were important to them and they put in their tent, into their space of the tent, right? They took their favorite stuffed animals, put it in the tent. They took their blanket and their pillow. They made a bed. They took cushions from the couch and made something soft, right? They moved into the tent. Let me dwell in your tent forever. Let me take refuge under the shelter of your wings. Let me give you a couple things about this verse. So a lot of scholars will tell you that at this moment in David's life, at this moment, he's been banished from the temple. Okay, so he's not allowed access to the temple. He has this desire to dwell at the temple, to be at the temple, but he's not allowed there. So now he's writing this saying, wait a second, I've got to find a place where I can dwell because I've been banished. I have this grievance. I'm struggling because I need the presence, and I don't have it. And so I've got to create something so that I can go and just move in and just sit and just dwell. Here's the thing. When you think about, I guess, when I was a younger teenager, and I somehow convinced my dad on this crazy idea to buy a teepee. And I told you we would use it when we lived in Ohio. And it would be winter, and it would be cold. I mean, it's not Michigan cold, but it's still pretty cold. And you would walk outside that teepee, and it would be cold. But then you'd step back inside, and all of a sudden when you step back inside, that warmth, that glow of the fire, like it affected you. You could feel it. I mean, the jacket came off. I mean, it was warm in there, and you didn't really, like, in they'd be doing all kinds of crazy stuff, like throwing hawks and throwing knives and shooting black powder rifles off and taking flint and steel and making fire and all this crazy competitions and doing all this stuff. For us, I didn't want to leave the teepee because it was warm. I just wanted to dwell in there. Do we have that same desire? Do we have this desire to abide? Do we have this desire to say, you know what, I need to create something so that I can just dwell in God's presence? Because that's really what this is about. I mean, this is what really David's saying is, I've got to create this tent so that I just need God's presence. I don't need anything else. I just need to dwell in his presence. I need his presence to saturate me. I need to rest under his wings. It's not a present thing. It's a presence thing. Like, he didn't need to be present in the tent. He needed the presence to be in the tent. You to think about it, David is probably saying here, like, let me just live here. I'm just going to stay here. I'm just going to stay in this tent. Because it's no ordinary place to dwell. It's not a tent at Disney in August and sweating. It's not a greenhouse in Florida, right? No. The tent David's talking about right here, it's a place of shelter. It's a place of refuge. It's a place of protection. It's a sanctuary for David. I don't even know if you'd say it's a place of comfort. Because sometimes just being in a tent, it's not comfortable. I'm not going to lie. I've spent many nights in a tent. I've camped a ton growing up. And I don't know that there was ever a time that I said, this tent, it's comfy. Yeah, I like sleeping on the ground. Oh, it's the best ever. And sometimes, when I was younger, my dad would say, well, we'll get one of those camping pads, and it's like a piece of foam, and it's about a half-inch thick. And you're like, what are we doing with this? Well, you can't get an air mattress because you can't carry that out in the woods. So you just roll up this piece of foam really, really tight and put a couple, strings or rope around it so you can throw it in your hiking backpack. And that's going to be good enough. And you're going to get in that tent and it's going to be no, I don't think it's comfy. If you're with the presence of God, I don't think you really care about the comfortable. You know why? It's because you are literally away from the outside world, and you're right there face to face with him. Let's look at a couple things in this verse. This tent, it's not an ordinary tent. It's all about the presence of God. So let's look at a couple words that stand out to me. Okay, so here we go. And if you've still got your Bible there, we're obviously in Psalm 61:4. Let me. Think about those words. Let me. God, let me. Let me. It's entirely personal. I mean, it's personal. It's about being with your God. It's about your heart's cry saying, let me. I need your presence. Here's a question for you. How much do you need that presence? Is your heart crying out, let me? Next word that kind of stands out to me is dwell. See, back in these times, a tent is kind of a dwelling place. I mean, it's common. It's primitive. It's much different than it is today. Tents are more of a thing, I guess, probably than what they are today, depending on, again, geography and where you live. But dwell means to turn aside. It means to tarry. It means to come in as an alien and then become like family. You're a guest. But dwell, though, think about it. When dwell, it's something that changes really fast. Let me dwell. Like you're asking for that invitation. You're looking for that invite in the mail. You're saying, I want to dwell. I want to be in there. The next word that stands out is forever. No duration of time. Nothing that can be measured. It's endless. It's without limits. Forever. Oh, let me dwell forever. I mean, think about that. If every day, every single one of us, I don't know if you take that approach of like kind of a prayer that you say every single day, like every day, not every day, but pretty consistently, I start out with a prayer every day before my feet even hit the floor. But imagine if I took it a little step further and I said, God, today, help me dwell forever. Dwell forever. Imagine how that would change if we became people that just pursued presence over anything else. Let me dwell forever. The next word for me is refuge. Have you ever been stuck in a storm? Have you ever needed an escape from problems? Think about this again. If David is really banished at this moment and he has no place to go, think about now how that impacts this word refuge. Because David's looking for an escape. He's looking to find a shelter. He's looking to apart from the troubles of the world, right? He's trying to find that spot where he can just sit. For all of us, we need refuge. I mean, seriously, have you turned on the news lately? Have you looked at the internet? I mean, we need refuge. I mean, the world is a mess. We need refuge. Let me dwell forever. Refuge. Let me give you two more. Shelter. Something that offers protection or affords comfort. An establishment to provide food or shelter. Something that you can stay under, and it's going to offer you something that you don't have. Shelter. Recently, we were trapped kind of in a storm. We were at Disney, and a storm came up, and we ended up being under an awning for 45 minutes. And we have video of it. It was like 60-mile-an-hour winds. It was hailing. It was awful. I had one, and I don't want to say her name, but she's crying. I mean, she thinks that we're going to die. At that moment, we needed shelter. David, at this moment, needed shelter. Why? Because storms were raging. The last word that I want to leave you with is wings. Is wings. Think about this. It's the part of a bird that allows a bird to fly. But it's also a part of the bird that when the wings are stretched out, it can provide something. It can provide shelter. Let me dwell in your tent forever. Let me take refuge under the shelter of your wings. Do you see one other word there that David uses in this, and that is your? He recognizes who's the tent. He recognizes who is the shelter. It's God's. So often for us, we create our own little kingdoms. We create our own little tents. How many of you as a child, or maybe kids or grandkids, ever came to you and said, "Hey, can I get some sheets out of the closet and take some sheets and take and put tents all over the house and make tents?" Like sometimes we create that stuff, right? Now this stuff here is totally God's. Let me dwell forever. Let me take refuge forever. Let me find shelter forever under your wing. Under your wing. It's all about proximity to God. It's all about being close to God. So let me ask you the second question tonight. How close are you to God at this moment? How close are you to God at this moment? I mean, are you like David and you're screaming and you're saying, I want to be in your presence. I need your presence. I need this tent. I need something. I need to just dwell in your presence. How close is your relationship with God? Are you on the outside of the tent? Or are you inside the tent? Has the tent collapsed on top of you? You're still trying to figure out the instructions on how to set it up. Are you taking comfort? Are you taking shelter in the security of God? See, I think so often, and I told you just a few minutes ago, I was raised Assembly of God. My parents' roots are Methodist, and my father has an uncle that was a Methodist minister his whole life, and so they were raised. Both my parents were raised in a Methodist church, and I think I've said this to you guys at some point. My dad is an electrician by trade, union electrician, and he had built his dream house, and literally next door was a family that went to the Assembly of God church, and there was a T there, and then the next door over here, this house, there was a person that went to the Assembly of God church, and then across the street was a family that went to the Assembly of God church, all the same church, Central Assembly of God in Cumberland, Maryland. And so they saw this young family that built their dream house and had 2 kids and moved in, and they said, ha, we're going to get them, you know? And so they started like, hey, we got to talk to these guys. We got to get this family to our church, right? And so I was raised from an early age when we left the Methodist church and we started going to my parents got radically saved, and my dad can tell you the stories about that I'd hear as a kid of just like hey, we got to make some major changes in our life, you know, like this is the real thing. And I mean he was like his dad and both my grandfathers thought he was crazy because all my family are union electricians, you know. They just thought both my grandfathers were union electricians. Everybody that was the family thing you did, you know, and they just thought he was crazy. Like, what is this? What's Dave doing, you know? So we got saved there under a great pastor, Pastor Ken Owen, and so my dad and just started like this journey, right? And so as a kid at 5 is when this happened. We started going to the Assembly of God church and just continued to spiral, you could say, out of control to the point where my dad quit his job and then decided that, hey, he wanted to be a pastor because that's what you do. And so he had this call of God on his life. And so he ended up quitting and going back to school, and he graduated from Southeastern years ago. And so we just, as a kid, just continued in that process. But here is the reason why. Why are you even saying all this? Because this is what I'm so concerned about for my girls. I have 3. I don't want to look back at the good old days and say, oh, remember those days? I mean, as a kid, we went to church on Sunday morning and Sunday night. And of course, my dad was the pastor for so many years. And you just, like, I remember on Sunday nights, they'd be like, it's Sunday night. It's time to get to the altar. Let's get to the altar and just dwell in the presence. And some of you that have been around church for a while, you know what I'm talking about. Those good old days, right? I don't want those good old days to end. And I also don't want them just to be the only memory of God's presence. I want to be able to be in the presence of God every day. And I want to model that to my girls, that I seek his presence. I need his presence. I need to find shelter in his presence. This world is tough. There's challenges every day. There's middle schoolers that write in my textbook, I need his presence. I don't want to look back at the good old days of growing up in Assembly of God Church and say, I remember when we tarried in his presence. We sought his presence. We need that every single day. We need to jump into his tent every single day. We need to dwell. We need to abide. We need to rest. We need to just sit and just soak in his presence every single day. I have a friend that he is an interesting character. And him and I did our doctoral work together, and God somehow aligned our lives. And I will tell you, he is the most unique individual, one of the most unique individuals. We have become brothers almost. I mean, we would literally, in our doctoral classes, we would debate one another for like sometimes for hours, and all the other students would just be sitting there like, eating popcorn, watching the show, and it was just the best thing. Every Saturday, I enjoyed when I'd go to class and I could just sit there and I could debate with Aubrey. That's his name. Aubrey had countless stories of growing up and his life experiences. So one time he said, we were in class and we were kind of debating a little bit, and he was talking about dedication and commitment. And I remember he saying, I went to high school with this guy, and he was the most committed and dedicated athlete I've ever met in my life. And we're like, yeah, okay, so? He's like, you may have heard him. And I knew where Aubrey grew up at. Knew that he grew up in Maryland. He's like, yeah, he's like, Cal was he was the most dedicated, he was a friend of mine, dedicated athlete all through school. He was so committed. And I said, Aubrey, did you just say Cal? And he's like, yeah, why? And I said, was your friend, did you go to school with Cal Ripken? And he's like, oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Aubrey just had so much life experience that just came out. In his last part of his career before he just retired a few years back, he was the director of all of North American operations for GM. He controlled all their operations for Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. And is an incredible leader, but he's an incredible man of God. In his house, he's built a tent, not a physical tent. He'll tell you it's his war room. And when I am struggling and I know I need somebody to pray, I can't tell you how many times I've texted Aubrey and said, Aubrey, I just need somebody right now to lift me up. And he said, I'm hitting the war room right now, and I'll be on my knees. Because Aubrey has built a tent. He's got that spot in his house where he goes and he just sits and dwells. Tonight, you're going to walk away and say, this guy really likes tents. When my birthday comes, somebody's going to buy me a tent. Yeah. I love God's presence. Because, see, I know what it does. It changes things. It changes things. So tonight, let me give you a couple thoughts just to kind of leave with a little bit. Here they are. Simple. First one is this. You have to take the attitude of, there's got to be more. There's got to be more. There's got to be more. That you're never satisfied. There has to be more. I've got to keep going back to his presence. I've got to run after his presence. I need more of that because it's going to change me. It's going to change my day. It's going to change everything. I spoke about my grandfather. My grandmother, she never worked that I know, that I recall. And she was incredible. And I loved her. They both have passed, but I love my grandmother. But her house was meticulous. Like it was the house that nothing was out of place. But let me tell you what she had. In the kitchen, she had a cookie jar. And I wish I had it, but it was about this big. It was brown, and it had a lid at the top. And she had painted it because it was during that season of life where, everybody was into ceramics. And so you'd go and you'd paint it, and then you put it in the kiln and all the things. So she had all these ceramics in her house that she had made herself. And one was her cookie jar. Let me tell you, I don't know how she would do it, but I would sneak out there as quiet as I could because she had a rule. You never eat between meals. There's 3 meals a day and a snack before you go to bed. And that was the rule at her house. 3 meals and a snack before bed, and that's it. And I would literally sneak out there and I would literally try so quietly to pull that cover off the cookie jar just because I needed a cookie. And I'm telling you, she'd be back in her sewing room, and she'd be running the sewing machine. And she'd be like, Brandon, are you in those cookies again? And I'd be like, are you kidding me? How in the world did she hear that? I had that desire as a kid for more cookies. The same has to be true with us. We have to have that same desire. It has to be more. There has to be more. There has to be more. I just want to dwell some more. I just need some more. I need to stay in the tent a little bit longer. Number 2, we should want others to come with us. I mean, we should want others to come with us. I mean, why do we want to keep God's presence to ourselves? Like, bring some people into the tent with you. Like, don't sit in there by yourself. Bring people in. Like, say, hey, I got this great place that you can just join God's presence. Hey, how about you just stand here with me? Let's just pray for a few minutes. Invite people in. I mean, it was boring. We had this big teepee, and so often it was literally just my dad and I in this huge teepee. We had room. We could have put 5 other guys in there. Come on in. Don't hoard his presence. Give it away. Help others experience it. Others people need it. This world is a mess. Number 3. You never want to leave. You never want to leave. Think about right now in the time of your life when you felt the presence of God so strongly. I mean, that presence that just changes, that presence, you can feel it. It's like it just walked in around you and gave you this big hug. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. That presence of God. Don't leave it. Don't leave it. Keep it. You can have it. Listen. Let me dwell in your tent forever. It's your choice. It's your choice. Hey, trust me, it's tough. Our day starts at like just after 5 o'clock. I try to hide when I get to school, but I'm telling you what, those kids find me. It could be a scavenger hunt, but those kids are going to find me. I say, I could hide in my room. I could lock the door. They'll find me. They'll figure out how to unlock my door. It's tough. Life's busy. There's always something. I mean, I got a 10-year-old, and she'll monopolize every ounce of my time. I mean, I'll be painting 1 minute, and the next minute I'm putting a puzzle together. Like, I get it. Like, there's always stuff. Like, that's really, I think, a lot of times what the enemy does in a lot of our lives is he just gives us all these things to do. Because the more that we do, the more it pushes out that time that you can just spend. I get it. Life is crazy. I don't always get the amount of time in his presence that I need or that I want. But we've got to strive to never leave it. To never leave it. So tonight, get in the tent. Get into his presence. Let it change you. Let it transform you. Let it shape you. Get in the tent. Live in a tent. I mean, if you have to, carry a tent around. And people are like, what are you carrying a tent around for? I just need to be in God's presence. I need to be like David. I just need to dwell there. I just need to soak there. I need to be refreshed and renewed. Don't think about the good old days. Make sure those days are today. Today. You think about so many times in the Bible where there was such a visible mark of God's presence. Cloud by day, fire by night. Visible signs of his presence. Fiery furnace. Like visible signs of the presence of God. But here's what I believe. Those days aren't just in the past. Those days are our days too. You can have those visible moments of God's presence with you every single day. Let me close with this, and we're going to take a few minutes and pray. We just finished for school. We just finished quarter number 1. So as a teacher, obviously, some of you may be teachers, so you know what I'm talking about. Quarter number 1 just ended, right? So what do I have to do? I have to put all their grades in, make sure they're all right? Make sure everything looks good. You know, they get those report cards sent out. So those parents read it, and they're like, what? You got a what in Bible class? It's kind of the end of that quarter, right? The new starts now, right? Here's a question that just felt like that just dropped in my heart, and that was, right now, if God was grading all of us, the report cards for VCA just actually got mailed today. If God mailed you a report card today because you just finished this quarter, and he graded you on the amount of time that you spent in his presence in the tent, what would your grade be? What would your grade be? Would it be, I need to get a little better? I don't think there's ever too much. There's always room for improvement. And tonight, that question is not, as we close, for any of us to feel guilty, because the Bible says there's no condemnation to those that are in Christ Jesus. So there's no guilt. It should just be a challenge that, you know what, tomorrow morning, tomorrow my lunch break, instead of sitting there in the cubicle, tomorrow afternoon when I have a little time, I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to get away. I'm going to build a tent all by myself, and I'm just going to sit in those presence that just will change the outcome and the trajectory of your day.